Ugurs, Zalas, and Unigurs. They managed to hold off the Ants' advances towards Byzantine forts and established themselves as the main force to be reckoned with among the barbarians on the other side of the Danube. In 565, Avars decided to move from the lower Danube to Pannonia. At the time, there were two Germanic tribes living there, Langobards and Gepids, and Slavs to the east of them. Following an alliance with Langobards, Avars defeated the Gepids in 567. Langobards themselves, noting a possible danger from their new neighbor, moved to northern Italy in 568, where they will eventually establish a new kingdom at the expense of Byzantine territories. Avars turned from allies into Byzantine enemies. Between 568 and 579, they complete the subjugation of the Pannonian Slavs. In 579, they start an open war by laying siege on Sirmium, the most important Byzantine stronghold north of the rivers Sava and Danube. After 3 years, Avars captured the city and a period of relentless attacks on Byzantium follows, occasionally interrupted with short-lived truces. Byzantium buys the peace, paying 80,000 gold coins per year. The Emperor Mauritius uses both military strength and diplomacy in order to push the Avars back. Byzantium strikes back in 585, sending army from Armenia against the lower Danube Slavs, who temporarily settled on Byzantine lands south of Danube. The Armenian commander, Mushel Mamikoinen, at first succeeds in pushing Slavs to the left bank of Danube, but eventually, after getting into the swampy deltas of Danube, his army gets destroyed in an ambush, and he himself died tied to a tree. Byzantium turns to offensive again. By the end of the 6th century, its army, led by Priscus and Peter, undertook 3 large expeditions against the lower Danube Slavs. Their successes are only partial, as it seems that the Slavs have some kind of a state organization. They had their Rex, King Musocius, and the tribes subject to him, which form some sort of an alliance. Waging war across the Danube was very demanding for the Byzantine army. Without guides and permanent forts, they could not establish foothold on the left bank of the river. On the other hand, Slavs lived in remote areas and marshes. They skillfully used their knowledge of the lands, avoided open confrontations, and always attacked from ambushes. The beginning of the 7th century brought troubles in Constantinople. The Emperor Mauritius was deposed and executed, and the throne taken by the former centurion Phoca. He concluded peace with Avars, so the provinces in the Illyricum lived in peace for a decade. This will be the last peaceful period before the stormy events which will follow in the first years of the rule of his successor, Heraclius. The consequences of Avar-Byzantine conflict were reflected in the everyday life. Singidunum, Viminacium and Naissus all experienced major damage during 580s. The chain of fortresses built by Justinian I during 550s could not hold back the attackers since, as written by the Byzantine historian Procopius, there was no army to defend the people. At the time, Slavs attack, either as Avar subjects from Pannonia or by themselves from the lower Danube. The city populations throughout Illyricum are on the decline, as refugees escape towards safer lands, Thrace, Thessaloniki and Constantinople. Even Hellada itself was in danger. Permanent state of war also led to the decline in trade and mining. The economy of the Illyricum was destroyed. Dalmatian towns along the Adriatic coast were also affected, as the break in the transport of raw materials from the interior causes decline in their production and trade. As cities lost population, their walls covered only a smaller urban core. The dissolution of church organization also followed. Throughout the 6th century, Slavs get into contact with Byzantines. They were not only adversaries, but Slavs also served as Byzantine mercenaries against Persia in the east and against Goths in the west. Other barbarians, like Ants and Huns, also participated in the Byzantine army. Some of them remained in Byzantium and established families. Their children had Greek names, but those were only isolated cases, and there was still a long way ahead for these peoples to be transformed into Romaeus and Christians. The year 613 is decisive for the future history of the Illyricum. The lower Danube Slavs moved in large numbers into the territory of the empire. They had no intention of going back to their previous settlements, where they were constantly being attacked by Avars, so they move on to stay on the Byzantine territory. Slavs laid siege to Thessaloniki in 614, but without success. The powerful walls of Thessaloniki were too much for the barbarians who did not master the art of siege. However, Slav tribes still expanded further to the south. Velejezids settled in Thessaly. Vaionids came into Epirus. Other tribes, whose names we do not know, settled in the North Peloponnesus, around the important port of Patras. Melingis and Yazarites moved to the South Peloponnesus. In only a few years, Byzantium lost huge territories in the European part of the empire.